Improving the pass rush is priority number one for the Jaguars. I'll tell you how many different ways they can do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for joining me, Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen, reminding you also to go to the YouTube page for free and subscribe to the Locked On Jaguars YouTube page. And then wherever you get your podcast from an audio standpoint, make sure you check in every day to make sure you don't miss an episode. Today's episode, the sponsor for today's show is Ultimate Football GM. That's right, Ultimate Football GM, man. It is the best game I have played in a long, long time, especially about the NFL. If you ever dreamed of being an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free bonus boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On, all caps, in the game. Now, make sure when you initially go onto the game, you make sure you get that boost and make sure you put that promo code in there, because trust me, you're going to absolutely need it, or you're just going to make it more and more difficult for yourself. All right, so we're going to talk about this pass rush today and mention a couple of ways that we can fix it. I think the initial thing is to think that all you have to do to fix the pass rush here in Jacksonville, or the only way to fix the pass rush here in Jacksonville, is to draft an edge rusher in the first or second round, and that guy go out and have 8.5 sacks. That will work too, but that's not the only way that this can get done, and we're going to go through it. It's the most obvious way, obviously, but it's not the only way that it's going to get done. We're going to talk about that in segment one. We're going to look at the draft picks on the interior and the exterior, and I hope that gives you an idea where I'm going with this. It'll give you a look at the draft, the players in the draft, interior and exterior, that the Jaguars can do this with. And is another way to do it if they can't, because you can't manufacture stuff. So is another way to do it. Is it through a trade? Is it through the veteran market? Or is it just fixing your coverage? If you get a nickel or a slot, there's a veteran out there that wants to be traded. Is that the way to go? So it's like hiding. It's like when you have a bad limb or a bad part of your body, and the physical therapist tries to strengthen everything else around it so that so much pressure isn't put on that. That's the philosophy that I'm going to at least tease a little bit here on this episode, to see if the edge rusher they want isn't there, and the one that they want, if they don't feel like he's an upgrade over the two that they already have starting, how much can he help them when it means putting one of the guys that's already on the field off the field? It's a lot to be examined here. But we're going to talk about first how important the edge is. And now, so with the Jaguars making the playoffs, everything that we talk about from this point forward is whether it's championship level, right? I've seen things where the Jags are 6 on people's power poll. I've seen it where they're 8th with an arrow pointing up. So that means that they're in the top 25% of the teams in the league, in folks' opinion. A lot of that has to do with the fact that people trust Doug Pederson, and that the Jaguars have Trevor Lawrence, which is a franchise quarterback. Speaking of franchise quarterback, shout out to Jalen Hurts for getting the bag, right? We'll hit that later on this week as we start talking about what the future is for Jacksonville in terms of talent and where they need to add players at. But today it's all about the defense, improving the pass rush. I think one of the ways that they're going to improve it, to me, they rushed the passer better when they were in a 4-down, when they had a four-man front. When there were 2 DTs, one of them being a 3 technique, or they kind of 2-gapped a little bit, but then they had the other guys on the edge with their hand in the ground. I think Trayvon Walker in particular is better with his hand on the ground than getting a running start, because when you get a running start, that gives the offensive lineman a running start too to be able to set up for you. I just think when you get him with his superior athletic ability and his strength and his suddenness, when you get him right up on an offensive lineman and that initial strike and that long arm and his power, I think it's very suited for him to just be all over people right away than it is for him to come off the edge with sort of a running start. And he always looked a little awkward doing that anyway, because I think he was trying to figure out how to measure himself. Now, if you watch Trayvon a lot on tape, it never looks like he got swallowed up, right? It always looks like he makes contact and there's this steady push with him pushing the guy back. That's fine if we're playing tug of war. That's not the way this works. You have to be able to leverage, disengage with a second move, and get there fast, because these dudes get the ball out of their hand so quickly. You got 2.5, 3 seconds, man, at the most, for you to be able to come off that edge and close that distance and affect the quarterback. Even out of a couple of sacks that he did have, I think one of them was when he just stunned it and he got there so quickly that the offensive line wasn't able to adjust, and he was able to come up the middle. Arden Key got some of those too, and I believe so did Josh Allen. Whenever you see the Jaguars and they run their little stunts and they twist, and guys just come free, and then you see the quarterback from the other team running towards the sideline, well, that's a plus for the Jaguars as long as they maintain containment. But there are other ways that they can do it. I think the scheme, this is a big year for Mike Caldwell, the defensive coordinator, because that part has to improve. And I know they did some things, like, for instance, against against Las Vegas, when they were down, they kept them from scoring when they were trying to make their comeback. And then they did that again when they got down to the Cowboys. And then they did it a third time when everybody saw it on national TV, when they did it against the Chargers when they were down 27-0 and had to score every time they got the ball. More importantly, they had to stop the Chargers from scoring. One, because they needed the time of possession. Two, they couldn't be trying to catch a moving target, right? That thing would have got to 34, would have been real hard for them to catch the Chargers. So they had to make sure that they continued to make the Chargers kick field goals and stuff like that. And that's exactly what happened. So we're not going to act like the defense didn't have moments where they were opportunistic, where they did look at the defense basically won the Titans game that got the Jaguars into the playoffs. So they did some good things. But the standard that we're talking about now, because they did make the playoffs, they did win a game, they did get to the divisional, the standard goes up. Now you want them to take the next step, and that next step is championship game, conference championship game, winning the division in easier fashion, hosting a playoff game again, conference championship game, and challenging for a chance to go and play for a world title. So those things have to improve for them to take the next step. Is it all personnel? Is it all outside guys and not necessarily sometimes the inside guys? Can you fix it another way? I think so. They probably can. And if you change your alignment, it also changes how many people you're allowed to have in these rooms. I'm going to explain that one little caveat, and I'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars, after I let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You heard me talk about this mobile app and this game before, and if you ever thought you make a good GM, you got to give this game a try. It's not as easy as you might think. Trust me. They fired me twice, okay? It's not as easy as you might think to create a dynasty, but when you play Ultimate Football GM, you get to control and manage every strategic aspect of your team as you play through seasons and lead your team to glory, trying to build a historic dynasty. I played it on an airplane, man. You can play it in airplane mode. You do not need Wi-Fi to do it, as long as you download that app and you pick up where you left off every single time. You have that option of continuing or starting over. With Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators. And you got to pay attention to the personality of the coach and the players, managing all the finances, and including negotiating salaries, fixing up the franchise, fixing the facilities, the scouting department, as well as the training department. So, Locked On listeners, Locked On Jaguars listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. So make sure to check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com, Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. You can start hanging out with me today here on Locked On Jaguars. Got a shout out to my everydayers, guys and gals that are always here with me every single day, as well as the new folks. Welcome to the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe on our YouTube page because it's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. Remind you now, we're going to kick this stuff in and start analyzing some of the offensive players, even the positions where we think we're not loaded. We're going to put you to the test tomorrow. We love our skill positions and our quarterback, but is it championship level? We'll find that out on tomorrow's episode, so make sure you check it out. But today, it's all about the pass rush. It's all about making sure that we address what Doug Pederson said is the number one priority for this team this offseason. There are a lot of different ways that you can address it, and then there are certain quandaries that you run into, too, from a team building perspective. What are those quandaries? You got three first-round picks already on the team playing edge, right? Two of them have been there for a while. The other one was a rookie last year. You got Josh Allen, Kayvon Chason, and, of course, Trayvon Walker, the number one overall pick from a year ago. So you say, why is that a problem? Why do we have these guys that we use these resources on, and this area is a problem? Well, one of them could be that everybody ain't as good as you thought they were when you picked them, all right? The other thing could be you got to get people lined up in the right spots. The other part of it is you got to show a little bit more patience with Trayvon Walker, as well as I'm going to give Kayvon one more year. Now, when somebody has had the first 3 years of someone like Kayvon Chason, usually I say go with your gut, go with what you see. It's not very good, right? I'm no longer expecting him and holding him up to the standard of being a number one pick. I'm just not. What I don't want to happen with Kayvon is by being around the league for a couple of years, you let him go, and then he goes somewhere else and he gets those 5 or 6 complimentary sacks. And you're like, why didn't he do it with us, right? So if there's no reason to give up on him earlier, don't do it. And his cap figure ain't that bad this year. So you just take a look and see what you got. Here's the issue with that, though. You're not going to put it on the back burner during the draft. You're not. Nobody's going to put that on the back burner during the draft. During the draft, you might say, yeah, let's bring it back and see what we got. But at the same time, you still might pick another dude, right? That's going to come in here and challenge. And then you got to add Jordan Smith in, who's coming back off of an injury. All 6'7", 260 pounds of him. So thinking that we like our guys, we're going to bring everybody back, we're going to benefit most from if Kayvon has a good year and we don't re-sign him, we already have a guy. And then if he does go in free agency, we'll get a compensatory pick. And the bottom line is you still ain't got the body. And that's everybody always talks about compensatory picks. When you talk about that, that means you're adding something else to your team that you don't know about. You're adding something else that might be just like him. And now you're doing it. You're going to get a second or a third round pick, or probably a third round pick. Now you're adding someone in a later who the likelihood that he's going to be better isn't as high anyway, because if he was, he'd have got picked in the first round. So the thing is always remember, I try to make sure we keep the bodies here, because when we say, well, we got compensation for a player, like they're going to get compensation for Jawan Taylor, but they don't still have Jawan Taylor. Therefore, they can't miss with the guys that they have now. And if they decide to replace him in the draft, that dude has to come in and play and give you the production that a dude gave you who was already in his 4th year. And that's a lot to ask of a rookie, unless you're just that great at drafting. You're going to get somebody that's capable of playing as a rookie the way another top 40 pick played in his 4th year in the league, where he didn't miss any games. So it's just, you're always trying to get to that next level. You're always trying to improve, as opposed to just playing switch up, filling squares in, saving money here and there, but then not actually being physically better. The people that make you physically better are the guys you want on the team, right? And I know that cap space is important because that gives you more opportunities to make people better. But the Jags have said that they are a draft and develop team and won't be heavy in free agency. So how do they do it? How do you improve? Well, you don't necessarily have to take a player on the outside. You can improve your rush by taking a player on the inside, i.e. Aaron Donald. Somebody like that. That's rare. That's first ballot Hall of Fame. That's GOAT defensive tackle. But it just gives you an idea that it can be done. You can hit it in more ways than one. The Jaguars, when they had a great pass rush in 2017, they had a bunch of different things. They had guys who were outside guys. They had guys who went from outside to inside on passing down. Their big guy, Marcel Darius, was a really good pass rusher from inside because he had played defensive end in college. So now you get a 330-pound guy who can really, really force that pocket on a quarterback. You can bring dudes in the lightning package. They used to bring 50, Telvin Smith, and those guys right up the middle, and Miles Jack right up the middle on their lightning package. And then you had Calais Campbell. But here's the other part of it that you had. You had coverage. You had coverage, and you had veterans at the safety department. You had 2 alpha corners. You had great coverage. So those 2 things really worked hand in hand. The Jaguars need a nickel, right? They need more depth and another athlete outside that corner, in my opinion. That person that plays the slot can be a safety who is a slot, like Branch, Brian Branch, everyone keeps talking about. Or it could be a veteran who wants to get traded, like Budda Baker. Now, the question is if Budda Baker wants to get traded, what are you saying? A second-round pick? And how is that better when he wants to get paid and become the highest paid safety in the league? And you said that you're a draft and develop team. These are things that we're going to talk about here in segment number 3 as we talk about improving the pass rush, and we'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, rolling along here, third and final segment on Locked On Jaguars. As I said, make sure you make your second listen tomorrow's show, especially the everydays. We're going to go through the skill positions and talk about do the Jaguars have a championship set of skilled players? And if they don't, how do they improve it enough? They don't have that far to go because they got the quarterback. How much more do they improve it, and what can they do to add to that side of the ball to ensure that they maximize Trevor Lawrence? We're talking about improving the pass rush. We mentioned the fact that you can help that pass rush by obviously going out and drafting somebody who can get you 8.5, 9 sacks. Having Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen improve. By the way, Josh Allen's on his 5th-year option, so there's another decision that has to be made. And normally you don't see pass rushers or people that folks are sure about get to this point without an extension. They ain't play around with it. This is like, yeah, we got to have him. We got to have him back, and we'll see if that starts to happen and what type of money Josh Allen's going to want, because that may be another situation where we're losing another guy and worried about a compensatory pick, and we just won't have the physical presence here making those plays. The Jags are going to be draft and develop. So does that mean draft, develop, and let go and worried about a compensatory pick? Or does that mean draft, develop, retain, get a guy here and make sure you have him on a second contract so you have this consistency at least over a 7 or 8 year window where you're giving yourselves a chance to win? I think it's for the latter, but we'll just have to see. The guys have to be worth the money. So we're talking about maybe fixing the slot and helping coverage as another arm of this it's almost like this little blooming onion of things you have to do to fix the pass rush. And it's not one singular thing. It's not one way to do it. There's been talks of drafting some people like Lucas Van Ness, or drafting Keon White, or drafting, let's just say, one of the other big time talents on the interior of the line, guys that are a little bit outside, and there's been talking about Mozzie Smith and his strength on the inside and how that can help. Yeah, if you got a guy that can push and collapse the interior, that does help the pass rush. It also, any way that you can create, if you look at the offensive line, it's just this little group that likes to form this little pocket. Any way that you can put dents and any way you can put little gaps and holes where these guys can squeeze through and make the quarterback get off of his square, it can absolutely help the team. It does not have to be an outside guy or an inside guy. It's just traditionally when you think about fixing your pass rush, I know everybody out there right now is thinking, just get us Derek Hall. That might do it, right? Just get us the McDonald kid out of Iowa State. Just get, or if you pick a guy in the third round, get Nkum from Central Michigan. Get these dudes that just fire off the ball that can play a role and help us with our total pass rush. That's fine when you look at it big picture like that. But my point is I want to know who's going to play in tough downs and tough situations. I want to know who my best guys are when you need to get that quarterback, when you need to get Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow off the field. I want to know who are the guys that you could depend on to do that every single time, that if you have them in the game together, they also can protect you if you try to run the ball on a draw play, right? That they can be good enough at their job to put pressure on the quarterback, but at the same time, maintain, contain, and don't let guys like Burrow and Mahomes get away from you and extend plays and run with their legs while your corners are playing man-to-man with their back turned back to the quarterback, and they don't see a guy scrambling. So this is talk about Budda Baker. Budda Baker, the all-pro safety slot. He's just a good football player, man. He's a little small, 5'10", 5'11", about $190, but he can play. Guys like him and Quadre Diggs, they're not the same. They're not the size that they don't play like the size that's on paper. Would you do it? It would, of course, it's intriguing, right? But what's the price? And then how actually good of a slot person? He's not a slot corner. He's a safety. How good is he in the slot? Now, I saw him more as a free safety, like a single high dude who was running and chasing plays all over the field. If he's a slot guy, but he also wants to get paid, doesn't that strike against the very thing that the Jaguars just said that they're trying to get away from? Like, you didn't want to make your own player the highest paid tackle in the league, right? It lasted for about 2 or 3 weeks when Juwan Taylor got signed, and then right behind him, Larry Tunsil came and got signed. Would you want to do that with a slot safety when that's going to require you to give this kid like a 4-year, $60 million extension with $35, $40 million guaranteed? You really want to do that right after you said that that's not what you're doing? And not only are you doing that, you're doing that, and guess what? You're actually giving up compensation for him. I would think it would cost a second, at worst, a third-round pick. You're going to give up compensation and make him the highest paid safety in the year for 1 year, or you're going to make him the highest paid safety in the NFL when you said that that's not what you're doing anymore. If they wanted to do it, they could create the space to do it. Yeah. If they wanted to do it, they could create the space to do it. But it'll just go against everything that they said they're about. It'll just go against everything they said they're about. So I would be absolutely shocked. Now, some other guys, like I did a podcast last week, I was talking about Brian Bresee. Like, I didn't see the fit. John Shipley from SI has written that the Jaguars have paid a lot of attention to Brian Bresee. So he's another guy that you wonder, is he an outside dude or an inside dude? Is he a 3 technique? Is he a 5 technique? Is he going to be lined in a 4B? Is he what is he going to be? Active. I said I'd be shocked because of how they had signed him and how they were playing guys last year. And the last thing that they needed was to use a first-round pick on somebody that's not a starter. Because remember, Roy Robertson Harris, 3-year, $30 million extension. Money like that don't come off the bench. Foley Fadukazi, money like he doesn't come off the bench. Devon Hamilton is just, in my opinion, he's the best big guy you got. So he there's a way that you can do this. And if you're going to run a 4-man front, now you got Josh Allen on one side and Trayvon on the other. And no, they're not going to play a Sam linebacker. So if they don't play a Sam linebacker in base, unless they come up with some kind of freak or amoeba defense, they're just going to have 8 dudes, right? And if they draft another one, he's going to get in the mix, and they're going to have more than Mary. You say, so Wig, what's the problem? Nothing, not at all. As long as we can identify who the guys are that are going to be on the field on 3rd and 10 in the AFC Championship game, that's the most important thing to me. You're going to have to figure out who those guys are, who those main people are. And once you figure out who those guys and those main people are, then you can say, okay, now we're ready to go out here and play. I do think they need to fix the coverage. Like I said, it's a blooming onion. It's the coverage, it's the play calls, it's the scheme, it's interior as well as exterior. I think they got a lot of guys like they have on the roster that are interior guys right now that are not necessarily pass rushers, and that's not what they were doing in the past. Well, if you're going to change your alignment to be in a four-man front most of the time, that has to change. That has to change. You need people that can flat out get to the quarterback. Now, you want to be able to get to the quarterback without sacrificing the run. This is not as easy as we all think. It's not as easy as I make it seem like. It's not as easy as you going to play Ultimate Football GM and just, no, this is hard. And guys don't grow on trees. So you have to really go into this draft and you have to understand exactly what it is that you're getting. And whatever you don't get, come back in the veteran market. Come back in the round 3 of free agency after the draft and go through. There's some names if you want to put some names out there. There's some guys out there that have done it that may be available for you. I know you don't want to bring back Jan Ngakwe. I don't know if he'd come back anyway, but he's one of them. Frank Clark is available. Zadarius Smith, I heard, is available for trade, possibly. There are a lot of guys like that can give you Justin Houston. They can't give it to you all the time, but they can be as like Toby Keith. They can be as good one time as they ever were or something like that. But you know what I mean? The thing is, they may have to come back and tap into that veteran market. But these are things that for a championship team have to be fixed. When you look at a championship team, and you look at a defensive team, they're not perfect. The Chiefs weren't perfect, but they were perfect when they had to be on Super Bowl Sunday. And the only way you can be that is you have to know who you are and you have to know who you with and who you got on the football team. And I think the Jaguars can possibly figure some of that stuff out, and maybe they can simultaneously fix some of these things at the same time. Make sure you tune in tomorrow as we look at the offensive skill players and name even more names and give you some ideas of how that championship level can be reached, even with the parts of the football team that are very, very strong. Until then, you guys take care of each other, and thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. Shout out again to the everydayers. We appreciate you, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.